Hi guys, welcome to Learn How To, and this week we're going to be looking at how to use what we call enhancement techniques to make your 3D products look amazing and realistic by showing them with real materials. So we're going to look at three basic materials today: wood, metal and plastic. And this is really useful, especially if you're maybe a GCSE student who's trying to render their product drawings, whatever it may be. And again, this will make them look really impressive in your folders. Okay, so we're going to start with wood. And in the past, we've looked at thickening and thin line technique around the outside edges of the object. And I like to use a similar colour to do the thickening and thinning with, rather than the pencil, because obviously it's not going to look very realistic if you've got thick pencil lines around your drawing. So what I tend to do first of all is I thicken and thin with the darker colour. Now if we look at a piece of wood, if you look at the wood grain on this desk, you'll notice there are some darker areas, okay, which is usually the grain line. Okay, if I just move my pad out of the way a little bit, the grain line areas here, and underneath you've got a lighter colour, which is if it was pine, for example, or softwood, you'd probably use like a yellowy colour for the base colour, and then the grain lines would be maybe a light brown or a dark brown. So we're going to use those two different colours. So my colour for this one is called raw umber, so a fairly dark brown. And we're going to first of all start by thickening and thinning the outer edges of the wooden block. I've just drawn three simple cuboid shapes for this exercise. Again, depending on what you've got to colour or render. You'll follow the same techniques. Okay, so we can clearly see got the outer edges, and again I'm just going to go over the inner lines with the brown as well. Not so heavy, but just to get some colour over the top so they don't look like pencil. Okay. Now if we look at a piece of wood has what we call end grain on the edge of it, and that is usually represented by curved lines where the annual rings of the tree trunk for each layer of its year of its growth shows through. So that would normally appear on what we call the end, so that would appear on this surface here, and then on the other surfaces, the top and the front, to represent a grain, usually it's like a wavy line, if you're going to try and do pine, for example. And you can, if you want to get quite fancy with it, add things like knots in there as well. Okay, so first stage, I've got some colours here. I'm going to put, let's say for example we're doing pine. Pine's quite yellowish in colour. It's the base layer, and same principle as before will apply when you're toning a 3D shape. So if the light's coming from top left hand corner, let's say up here, draw my little smiley face on, shining down, your top surface is going to be the lightest. And again, with all the other techniques that I've showed you, keep those flowing as we've been learning, keeping it all the same direction, moving the whole arm, nice and light, medium tone on the left, a little bit heavier, but not too heavy with the dark tone on the last surface, because what you don't want to do, because crayons tend to be quite waxy, you don't want to create a waxy surface that you won't be able to put the other brown lines over in a minute. So just a tad darker. Okay, so next we're ready for our grain lines. So we go back to our brown crayon that we were using, and I'm seeing my crayon's getting slightly blunt, so just give that a quick sharpen. A bit of a point on it now. Okay, so we're going to run some wavy lines across the front surface. Okay, I'm not going to put too many in, because obviously the more grain lines you put in, the more you've got to tone. It can look more effective, but just for the purposes of today, we'll keep it simple. So we're going to draw some wavy lines, pressing fairly firm. And again, they don't have to be necessarily too parallel either. They can go up and down a little bit. Okay, or taper, usually with a bit of a waving. So that one's going to waver that one up there a little bit. And we'll kick that one up and then back down again. Okay, so it's pretty random, really. Let's put one more in along there. Okay, and along the top edge as well. Let's just, we've only got room for really one in there, so let's just do a wavy line on there. Okay, now where they hit the edges, okay, these lines that run across the front, they would curl up or curve. It doesn't really matter whether you curl them down or up. I think down would look probably more effective on this. So imagine that you've got a tree trunk and the circles of the annual rings are running round from those lines. So we follow that curve over to the other edge. And again, usually the top corner will follow through as well, and then this last one, like so. Okay, so now we've got our annual rings in there for the end grain, and then it's ready to tone to get the effect that we want, because at the minute it just looks like a yellow block with brown lines on it. So we'll start with the top surface, and we go right from the very back edge here, and we're going to tone fairly heavy and then fade out to nothing. So you still sort of see some of that yellow coming through, like so. If you wanted to be really clever, we could add a knot into this in a minute. So I'm just going to do the top edge first. So again, following that underneath, go to our next line. What I don't want to see is sort of that, where you end up with like a line. It needs to gradually go from dark to light to get the effect. Okay. And nice and dark on the line. And then gradually, softly moving away from that edge. And then as we come onto the front surface, let's say where we've got a wider area like this, you may want to build in. Sometimes you do get like a V-shaped grain as well. So it may be that you end up with something that looks a bit like that. Sometimes a little knot in the middle, okay, which you can put in. And then tone all these back as well. So we're going to dark on this edge, fade that out, and where you've got a wider area of yellow, you can bring your toning in a bit more. And I tend to work in sections with this if it's quite a long block. Dark up against the corner edge, fading out to nothing. Move down to your next line, so it's dark underneath that one. Gradually blend that out. Obviously there's a narrow gap there, so it's quickly going to fade out. But here we can come out a little bit further with our tone. Okay, a little bit of dark to light under that one. And go to our next one down. It's wider here, so again we can come out a little bit more. And again, if you want to go around in circles while you're toning, just to help blend that in a little bit, makes it smoother. That helps sometimes. And then down to our next one. Dark to light. Got to get rid of that line. Don't want a heavy line there. On to the next one. Again, if it has lost its definition a little bit on the very top edge, you can just go back over with the point of the crayon, sharpen it up a little bit. Okay, some people like to then take another colour and blend in a second colour into these just to give it that extra, because again, if you look at mine, even though this is a printed laminate, it's a computerised image on this laminated surface, it's trying to represent, I think it's beech wood, this. And again, you can see sort of very dark grain lines in the top surfaces of the grain. Then you've got this sort of medium tone below it, and then obviously the very base tone, which is the lighter colour. So next we're going to just do the last little bit. Again, if I've put these lines, this sort of V shape in here, these also would follow around onto the edge as well. So we've got a few more in there. And again, same principle applies. Start in the top corner, you just got to sort of tone in a bit of a curve this time. So start here, dark to light, go to your next one, dark to light, next one, dark to light, next one, dark to light. And what you're trying to do is create an optical illusion. It's all to do with the pressure of your hand. Anybody could do this. You don't have to be an amazing artist. It's just following these easy steps. Okay, now if we look at that from a distance, we can clearly see that that looks like a piece of timber or wood. I'll just bring that a bit closer to camera so you can see the effect there. Okay, and that's what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so that's wood. We're now going to move on to metal. Now for metal, metal tends to catch the light. It's quite shiny, it's reflective, it's a flat surface. Sometimes metal has a bit of a bluish tinge to it. It doesn't have to all be grey or silver. So I'm going to mix up a couple of colours here. So I'm going to take a dark grey, kind of thick and thin with that, and because it catches the light, what I'm going to do this time, when I thicken thin around the edges, I'm going to sort of flick it a little bit as well, so it appears heavier on one side and then lighter in the sort of middle of the line. You don't have to do this, but I just think it gives it a little bit more, makes it a bit more realistic. Okay, same with the inner lines. But not quite so heavy, because they are inside. Okay, so metal. Quite an easy one to do this. We need to think about highlights and the way in which the light hits the surface, and very simply you can just do this with a ruler and two parallel lines. Okay, I'm going to change the shade of my grey. I'm going to go for a slightly lighter grey with a bit of a bluish tinge. Okay, so keeping the ruler on an angle, we'll start with the front face. Because it's quite a big surface, you might want to do two highlights depending on how big your shape is. Okay, and they can hit the edges, it's not a problem, and flick them from heavy to light, like that. Keep the angle of the ruler the same, so it's parallel between the last one and the next one. And again, another pair of highlighted lines, like so. Now, the distances between these gaps can be different, it doesn't really matter. And what we want to try and achieve is that we keep this bit in the middle white, we just leave that as it is, okay? Now, where it hits the top surface, normally it'll disappear back on a slightly different angle, because as all of our scientists will know, that light tends to refract, go off in different angles. So where it would hit here, it would probably shoot off in a different direction, okay? And you might even get the light shining on this edge just slightly as well. So I'll put one on there as well. All right. But as I say, at least on one of the opposite edges, change the direction so it looks more realistic. And all we have to do now is, remembering our dark and light process, just shade back from these highlighted lines, dark to light, and fade it out. And really, there's hardly any colour on this end, and that's fine. Don't worry about that. As long as you don't have any line showing here, and this blends naturally at the same angle as the highlight, from dark to light, like so. Follow that through onto the front surface. Again, our front's normally a bit darker as it's away from the light, but it might be a little bit more intense up against the highlighted line there. And again, it doesn't really have to completely fill this area. Nice and dark up against the edge. And then fade that into nothing. Try and keep the angle there the same so that it flows through, and whatever width of the shading you've done here, try and match it on below. Like so. Last surface. Last bit there. Again, blending that. And not necessarily taking it completely shaded right to the edge. And then the final blend surface, a little bit of dark to light there, not quite so heavy, and a little bit of dark to light there. Okay, so again, leaving the highlight area white. Now I know I'm doing this on grid paper, so you do see some of these triangles coming through, but I will be doing some other rendering exercises on plain paper in my later videos. So if you want to tune in some of those, you can have a look at how we do things such as concrete, glass, and a few other materials to enhance your products further. So our last one is plastic, and if you think about plastic's quite flexible. Okay, so it will catch the light, and as this ruler bends, we want to make the effect bend as well. So the way I was taught at school was to draw the highlight in a sort of S shape, and that sort of does the trick. So let's change our colour. Plastic's quite colourful, so just imagine this is a piece of acrylic. Same principle again. I'm thickening and thinning, but I'm again going to, because the plastic is quite shiny, it's going to catch and bounce light off the edges. So again, I'm going to thicken thin, like so, leaving a thinner edge. Excuse me. Okay, and our last three surfaces to go. So we're now going to put our highlights on. I'm going to draw that as an S shape. So similar to the way we've done the metal, but sort of sweeping S shape. Same on this other side, because it's quite a big surface. Maybe not quite so big, that's a bit further away from that one. And then again, following them through on the top surfaces, a little bit smaller, but a similar sort of position. And there may even be a slight one on the end surface as well. Okay, and like we did with the metal, you're going to turn it exactly the same. A little bit harder to do this one because you've got to go around in circles. It takes a little bit more time because you're following around a curved shape, but exactly the same. Dark to light away from that, fade it out. Nice and dark up against the edge of the line, leaving the highlight in the middle white. Dark to light. around the shape, softly blending that. And again, where you come towards the corner, because the light will be bouncing all over the place, you don't have to completely fill the whole surface. A little bit in that corner maybe. Onto your main surface, a big one at the front, wider areas. So again, you can come out a little bit more your colour, but remembering dark to light, keeping that gradual here. So there's no line, just softly blends into nothing. Nice and dark up against here. Got a big area here, so bring that out a bit more. This one up against here. Again, big area, so again I can come out a little bit more intense up against the S shape. And then gently blend that out into nothing. Into the last bit here. Again, carefully going around that S shape, nice and heavy. And then gently tone that out. Rounding circles as we go, gives you the softest effect. And again, just to go back and have a look, if it's a bit tatty in places, just go back over. And where the curvy bits of the S are, they should be more intense as well. Onto the last end here. Nice and dark there. Fading that into nothing, maybe a little bit in that corner. And this one here. Okay, so that's our final one done, plastic. Hope you've enjoyed doing this. Now it's time for you to have a little practice. So go away, draw yourself some blocks, some isometric shapes, and then remember, just recap, thick and thinning in the colour that you're going to use for the material. Put your base colour on if it's wood grain, or your yellow, grain lines over the top, and then the same for the metal and the plastic with the colour that you've chose for those two. Okay, don't forget to tune into my YouTube channel next time. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.